G'day listeners and welcome back to today's episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players that are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. I'm the host, Heff, and today I am joined by the great man, the elder statesman, the Statesman. How you going, mate?
I'm doing very well. A bit of a busy period, as you can imagine. I think I'm in 4 different podcasts just this week. So kept busy, but loving the research. It's a great time of year, only 43 days before the first bounce.
It must be one of those elusive periods where you're not working every day of the week and you actually got a bit of time to do some podcasts. What's going on up in the territory there, Statesman?
No, I'm actually working very hard. So it's quite hard to actually find the little segments of an hour I can spare to actually do some podcasts. But look, it is my hobby, so I do enjoy it. So I will not complain. That's it, mate. It is good fun. So, well, basically you're on every podcast known to man.
You're on the Draft Doctors, you're on the Pod, you appear on the Traders from time to time to give your expertise there. I want you to do this right now. Pick your favourite podcast.
Oh God, that's hard. Yeah.
Look, mate, I'm not actually going to make you do it. It's probably like naming your children.
Yeah, I actually love them all for different reasons, but obviously the Draft Doctors is where I started doing the podcast, so I should say them, shouldn't I?
Well, apparently Dossie claims you got him first on his radio show back in Adelaide, so I don't know.
Yep, that is true. That it's a very long time ago.
Anyways, we're here to talk about the Sydney Swans. Now, Statesman, I actually had no idea you're a Sydney fan. I put a call out to our gold members and they're like, can you think of a Sydney fan? I said, can you think of a Sydney fan I could interview? And they were just like, why don't you just do the Statesman? And I had no idea. Being, we've become pretty good mates over the years. I had no idea. Well, how does that originate? You're a Perth boy. I don't get it.
No, I'm actually a Tassie boy, to be fair. So the reason why there's a connection with Sydney is my grandfather, when Sydney used to play on Sundays, the only VFL game you could get in Tassie. So he barracked for them because they were on telly each Sunday, and I used to just sit there and watch it with him. But I spent a bit of time in Sydney as well, and they were ruling at the time. So I went and saw them and actually enjoyed and built a connection with them. But to be fair, I'm a bit of a Clayton's footy fan. I'm more in fantasy than I am about a team. So I'm not one of these supporters that goes a bit Burko when things aren't going well. I'm actually who's going well in the fantasy team.
Yeah, I'm a bit the same, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, I'm a diehard Port supporter, but when we're not going too good, the fantasy kind of takes over, that's for sure. I don't know why I thought you were from Perth. I think we chatted about Perth a fair bit when you were in Adelaide last and we had a few drinks together.
Yeah,
I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah, I spent 13 years of my life in 2 periods in Perth.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking. All right, well, we'll get stuck into the show. Let's talk about Sydney in general, though. Really disappointing performance in the grand final. I don't know if you can blame them too much, a young team coming against an absolute powerhouse. But how do you think they go? Do they rebound this year, or do you think there's going to be some implications from that grand final defeat? What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think people probably reflect on a few circumstances. The Adelaide Crows are probably the best example in the camp that followed and sort of the way down afterwards. I think they're a team up on the rise. So I probably think it's a little bit more you need to lose one before you learn how to win one. So I think that's probably a bit more. I think they overachieved last year, so maybe grand final wasn't the actual where they deserved to be.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably semi-finalist probably is a little bit closer to the mark, but they're a team on the way up.
You are right. When you look at the core of their group, the core is kind of getting younger and younger each year as opposed to some of the other teams that dropped off after a grand final smashing where their teams are a bit older. So, yeah, I have some faith that they might not go the wrong way and still keep progressing this season. All right, we'll get stuck into some individual players. As always this year, I'm talking about undervalued players, breakout contenders, and some stash options for the future. So we'll get stuck into the undervalued straight away. And the first one I have is Peter Ladhams. So really a shocking year for him after so much hype, getting traded to a new club. We're all expecting big things. Didn't really step up. So the questions I've got for you really is, how much does Hickey have left? Because he's the one kind of getting in his way. And is it possible that he steps up this year?
Look, it is possible, but it probably requires Hickey to have an injury. And we can all agree that Hickey's body is not at its best or the peak of his career. He's in his 30s. I think he turned 32 this year. But there's no doubt that he's number one. So he plays a really good defensive role as a ruckman, as well as create some options through the gut. So Ladd is number two. I've got a funny feeling that Ladhams will probably play a lot more games this year, but might be the forward come ruckman. So he's one of those that I think, depending on how many keepers you've got, that you hold on to him because there should be some paybacks for the owners in the reasonable foreseeable future.
Is he one that still has forward status here? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't think so. I think he's ruck only.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that probably makes him a little bit harder to keep in some keep leagues. Depends how your league operates. What we found, you might find this interesting, Statesman, is because Ultimate Footy is no more. We've lost the utility position. So a lot of teams, if you're holding less than 18, you can't play your backup ruck as a utility, like a lot of teams can. So it makes it very hard to either stash your handcuff or really stash anyone who's not a number one ruckman for the future. Yeah, it makes it super hard. And you are correct, he is a ruck only. So again, I don't know how you'd keep him this year. And if he is playing forward, it's not going to be the best for his fantasy scoring. He needs that number one full-time ruck. So, yeah.
Agreed.
I'm not really here on him at the moment. Next one I want to talk about, I didn't really know whether to talk about him as a breakout or undervalued because we claimed that the Lizard, Nick Blakey, had broken out after his third game last year. I think he was averaging 80 after 3 rounds, 2G4P, too good for the podcast, that is for the new listeners. And then he started to taper. So what do you reckon? Can he be more consistent this year? What's the go with the Lizard?
Yeah, I think he can be more consistent. I think the only real issue with him is that he'll attract tags because they love the footy in his hand. He's so attacking and he can break games open. So I think he will have or continue to have a bit of a flaw because of attention that comes towards him. But I think he'll just get more consistent. The only issue I see with him is I don't think he's going to have a massive ceiling. Yeah. But to say he tapered off, his last 5 games was at 76.6.
Yeah, he came home with a wet sail.
73.8. His average was 76.2. So he's still quite fieldable already. I think he only takes another step up. But look, it won't be massive. I think he might be able to break into the 80. I can't see him ever being anything over the 85 to 90.
Yeah, I agree. And I even think that's probably generous with just the way he plays, really. He's not a real big, I don't think he's going to be a real big accumulator. He's going to be that kind of dash off the halfback and a team that's probably looking to possess the ball a lot less, which was evident by their fantasy scoring. You know, players like Jake Lloyd couldn't rack up as often and stuff like that. They're a team that probably wants to get the ball moving forward and not chip around in the back line anymore. So it's going to be hard for him to actually, put up those big numbers. But like you said, as a 70 to 75 average, 80 if all things go to plan, it's not a bad option. And when you consider he's pretty new to this position, only really been playing there a season and a half, it kind of goes to show how kind of a versatile player he is because he's played forward, wing. He's one I think you can draft with confidence just because he'll deliver a reasonable score most weeks because he's adaptable, really. Anyway, we'll get into some other breakout contenders. Braeden Campbell fits the mould. Third year in the system. He was a sub a few times last year, especially in the finals as well. Have you heard any reports on his pre-season? Because he's one I'm just wondering, can he break into the side? And if that happens, who does he come in for?
Yeah, this is the biggest issue for the Swans because they've got so much young talent. So Ollie Florent is not getting a secured and simple and open role. Justin McInerney is sort of filling gaps. So Braeden Campbell sort of fits into that sort of hole a little bit of going, where does he slide in? The key thing here is he has a great foot and they'll want that in the team at some point is where. So obviously Matthew Lloyd is not going to lose his position. I think Nick Blakey has already shown that he's going to be in that defensive line. And obviously the recruitment from Essendon in a intercept defender has created a bit of an option is you probably only squeeze one more small defender. Now, I see Braeden Campbell as a bit more of an attacking player. So thinking that he's a halfback flanker that gets a licence or he gets onto the wing.
Yeah.
The problem is you've got to knock off a couple of players to get there. So I see him possibly getting rotations. I can't imagine him missing out on the 23 too often, but it's injuries that'll open it up for him. So it's a late pickup with a bit of hope, but the kid's got talent, so he'll get opportunities. It's just whether he gets the right type of role to be good enough scorer for you.
Yeah, and in terms of his fantasy numbers as a junior, he was in because there's a COVID-affected year, so the numbers were hard, but he was in the higher end of those, I'm pretty sure. So he's definitely a talent, and he was a top-end draft pick. I think, I can't remember, was he 7, 8 around that mark, or was he earlier?
Yeah, he was certainly first round.
Yeah.
For some reason, I've got 16 sitting in my head, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, probably tell you in a second, but we'll move on. I know it was the first round, so yeah, that just kind of goes to show the quality he is. But yeah, interesting to see that one. If things go his way, he's definitely one to be looking at. The other one I want to look at is Dylan Stephens, and I want to hear your opinion on where you see his kind of ceiling being in the future, because it was awesome to see him secure a spot in the end, like played the last third of the season really, all the way through to the grand final. The only issue is like he got a decent role in the end, but didn't really show us anything fantasy-wise. He played really on the outside a lot with a few patches up forward and kind of rotated through those wings. So, I don't know, can you see him going another step this year? Any step would be good, but basically, what do you think he could average this year?
He's a wingman, and wingmans are losing their ceiling.
Correct.
Even absolute stars like Gaff are sort of dropping away, and some may say it's the result of how the team is travelling there at West Coast as part of it. But also clubs are getting more that you get it out of the guts, you get it in the forward line as quick as you possible and keep it as the forward line as long as you can till you get 6 points, and then we go back and start again. So there's not many teams that are holding on to the footy and chipping it wide like we were seeing probably 5-6 years ago. So therefore, there's a cap on his ceiling. Look, he's a good player, but at the end of the day, he's not going to get inside mid-time, so his ceiling's capped. So look, I think he's a mid-70s, high 70s outside midfielder, which the reality is stream option. You wait till, it gives you a good score in an early game and you use it from the bench. But that's all I see him at the moment, unless I see some changes, because he's got quite a few players that he's rotating through that sort of outside role, and Nooney's another example of that.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct on the wingers there. So I'm rolling through the basically top 50 midfielders here. You're waiting until you get to about rank 29 till you get the best scoring winger, and that's Carl Amon at 96. And like you keep going down, the next best one keeps scrolling down. Do you include Mitch Duncan, who can run? He just runs up and down from a halfback flank all day. I don't know if you include him, but Lockie Whitfield's probably the next one, and probably had a career worst season of 90. Well, not a career worst, but you know what I mean? Like he dipped a lot last year with an average of 90. So you're right, with the trends of those players, they're not going the right direction. And, if you're looking at the pinnacle as being Carl Amon, I don't know if that's the kind of player you really should be targeting, that's all. Especially as a mid only, sure.
Correct.
If they're a defender that could push to a wing, like that's perfect. But if they're a mid only, it's probably not going to be too attractive, that's all.
Yeah, stream options.
Yeah. Let's move on to the stash options. So players that we think are worth a hold for the future. Now, these are my opinions, Statesman. You might have different ones, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong at any time. But the one I've got as a stash option here, and I'm still not sold on him, to be honest, it's purely on his junior fantasy numbers, and that's Angus Sheldrick. So massive fantasy scorer as a junior, but he's pretty little fella, and he kind of plays a bit more as a small forward role, a general forward role for Sydney. Do you think he can ever replicate that underage fantasy scoring at senior level, and is he a player worth holding on to?
Look, I think he's some quality. The problem is where does he get that midfield time? That's where his scoring is. So you're talking Mills, Parker, Warner, Rowbottom are probably the big four. You've got Goulden, who's going to get some time. You're probably going to have Tom Papley, who I think has got some ability to lift his scoring this year.
Yep.
You've got McInerney, you've got Florent. You've got Dylan Stevens. So there's so many through there. Him getting quality inside time to show his junior scoring is probably achievable this year, unless there's a long list of injuries.
No, 100% agree. You're going to be waiting a while for him to have. I just feel like they might develop him into a different role, like maybe even like a pressure forward type thing, because if he's got that inside game, but he's a bit smaller and can kind of sit up forward and kick a few goals as well, like he's been doing in the twos, they might kind of change his kind of game style for that, and it does happen to some players. Another one is Matt Roberts. He was a big name in last year's draft. Really, he's one of Kay's favourite. He was talking about heaps. I don't know a heap about him, but what are your thoughts on Matt Roberts? The listeners seem interested in him.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan. Again, we're at that sort of mid time. So I think he's one that they'll try and get CBAs into this year. The problem is this will be giving him development time. It won't be giving him, okay, you're part of the engine room now, let's go. So he is definitely a stash, but I see him more likely to get inside mid-time than Sheldrick. I think Sheldrick might play as that small forward more than actually get the CBAs.
Yeah, I do remember Roberts now. He was the one that only scored 6 last year and didn't play much game time when he did come on. So,
Correct.
Yeah, no, I do remember him now. Hopefully he gets a bit more of a run this year. But, yeah, definitely I think one to stash because there are some signs of potential. We're just yet to see it at the senior level, that's all. We'll move on to some listener questions now. So the 96ers, they ask 2 words, row and bottom. And one question he's got here, can he push to be an elite 90 to 100 territory this year, and is he a keeper?
Yes, he's a keeper, and yes, he can push into the 90 to 100. So obviously JPK is the one that's left a bit of inside time. We also saw Mills at the second half of the year actually reduce his CBAs.
He went out to the wing a lot more.
And not only that, was used as a bit of a sweeper and a cleaner in defence, which is a little bit of a worrying side. Now, I don't know whether that's coach-driven or whether that's actually player-driven. But as soon as he moved out of the CBAs and without JPK there as well, Rowbottom just sick. So we're talking last 5 games of an average of 107. So that's where the bit of excitement is. No doubt that he's going to play that junkyard role for the Swans. So I see Rowbottom taking a big step up.
Yeah, I think to play devil's advocate a little bit, Kennedy didn't play a hell of a lot from round 10 onwards. So, and it kind of did coincide when he did kind of jump up a little bit there. Kennedy was on the outside a little bit more. I think he was playing, they're trying to keep him uninjured a bit more as well. But that said, like I still think there's scope for further development. My worry is basically their midfield setup. It rolls so deep, and when he was scoring so well at the back end of the season, it felt like he was like the main inside midfielder. He was kind of given that job as a main inside guy. Come finals time, if you look at his CBA numbers, they back it up too. He seemed to dip out a little bit, and Chad Warner seemed to be the kind of guy they went back in there with. So I'm just a little bit worried about that. But I think it's one of those ones where you just monitor the preseason, because if Horse looks like giving him that kind of main inside role, then I think the sky's the limit. He's got so much potential. It just depends how many other players get in his way, I think. But I think easily, well, very close, he should get a 90 this year. And if everything goes to plan, then it's the 100 plus, I reckon.
Yeah, I think the 96ers actually put it the right way. Just went in a draft doctor mode there just for a second.
Yeah, all good.
Heff, 99ers instead of the 96ers. The range of 90 to 100 is spot on the mark. He's not 10 like he did the back half of the season, but he's going to be inside guts a lot more than he was last year.
Yeah, like if he goes 100, I wouldn't be surprised. But I've also just got that bit of feeling that there might just be a few players that get in his way to getting there, and a few different roles and things that happen throughout the year. That's all. At Beggo's Boys, thoughts on Justin McInerney in 2023 and beyond? Could be a steal if you nab him late. Do you agree?
I think he's worth the punt, but there really is going to be one of those outsiders again. I just can't see him rolling back in defence. I think he'll be on the wing rotation. It just limits his ceiling.
Yeah, and he was probably most valuable last year with that defender status. And that was really obtained by, I don't know, like he scored really well the year before playing across defence, but the only good scores he put up was really when he was in the midfield. So it was a bit of a false commodity there. And then we kind of saw him play full-time on the wing last year, and as we talked about with the wings, it wasn't great. I don't see his role changing too much, so I'm gonna pass on him this year, although I was his biggest fan a couple of years ago. But I'm off him at the moment. At Warner Brothers AFL is asking who benefits the most from the inevitable Lloyd downfall across the next couple years. Is it Campbell, McInerney, Blakey, Florent, or one of the new draftees? Is Gould waiting for Rampy? And can Errol get CBA time this year? Upwards of 30%. So there's three questions there. Who benefits the most from the Lloyd downfall in a few years' time?
Blakey and Campbell.
Yep, I'd agree with that other than the names he's listed there. Now, is Gould going to be anything? Is he waiting for Rampy to go? What's the go?
One of Dossie's boys, so guarantee you he's never going to play a game of footy.
I think he's one of Dossie's boys because Dossie used to be the ground announcer for Glenelg Tigers, and I think Gould was a Glenelg boy in that season, having a ripping senior thing. So Dossie's always going to love Gould, I think. Errol Gould and CBAs this year. What's your reckon?
Yeah, look, he will get some, but he's just so clever as that high half forward role. So I think that's where his main role will be.
Yeah, and he's dangerous there for him too. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
Richard Eliadis asks, does the Lizard King improve again and become a 90-plus backman? We kind of covered that, but do you see 90-plus?
Well, certainly not this year. It'd be interesting to see if his role changes a little bit when Lloyd retires.
Yep, that's correct. All right, let's wrap that one up. So, just one last kind of plug. We've got a live show. Well, we're joining in on the DT Talk live show at the Highway in Adelaide on the 25th of February. Heard a little rumour that the Draft Doctors listener draft might be held at the same venue on the same day. What's the go there, Statesman?
I don't know how all of this got coordinated. It's like people talk. I don't know about this. Wild rumours at the moment.
Is there any chance of seeing the Statesman in Adelaide?
There's a chance, but that it's a very busy time of year for me. So I will try to pop down there, but we'll see how things go at this stage.
All right. Well, I hope it happens, mate, and I hope we're having a beer on the weekend. Anyway, Pod and the Draft Doctors. That's where you can hear the Statesman. Where can people find you on the socials there, Stato?
Yeah, at Statesman33, Twitter. I think it's probably the only one that I sort of cover. We go by the shows on everything else. So Pod and also the Draft Doctors.
All right, and while we're at it, we'll plug our stuff at Keeper League Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Make sure you use the code Keeper20 at manscaped.com to get yourself 20% off and free shipping. And please consider signing up as a member to support the podcast to keep us delivering you this audio goodness each week. Anyways, thanks for joining us, Statesman, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolute pleasure.